Fat, drunk, and stupid is no way to go through life, son.
I got the butter.
You sounded like Brando.
Like Brando. I was just thinking that.
Didn't he?
Pass the butter.
Pass the butter.
Trim your nails. Stick your finger up my asshole.
You got a pretty good Brando down.
No, I've been
You know
doing
that
it.
movie's coming soon. Get ready.
Oh, yeah.
I'll be reading against you for it.
Fuck you, man. You're like J.T. Walsh. J.T. Walsh called me right after Chris Farley died. He said, "Hey, Chicky, you got another gig coming."
Oh,
I was like, "Oh, man."
Oh, no.
Because I had played Belushi.
Wired.
Yeah, right.
I was working at Second City at the time when they were making that movie, and of course everybody had read that book.
Wasn't there like a political movement against that movie?
Yeah.
There was a total.
Do we really have to talk about this?
There were people. Well, it was a big. I mean, everybody read Wired who was working at Second City because Belushi came up through there, but nobody talked about it. You know, because it was sort of a, not really a tell-all, but it was pretty. I mean, it laid the facts out, and it wasn't nice for anybody who was close to him. And
Well,
they
it
were
read
making
like largely like an indictment.
I hadn't read the book.
because it was the Bob Woodward, right?
Woodward,
Yeah.
See, the problem is, you know, when a guy like Bob Woodward writes this kind of a book, he's an investigative reporter.
Right.
He only writes what he can corroborate from 5 independent sources, and he writes sort of like a cold fish. He doesn't
It's
say,
very- right.
you
It's
know,
just
what
objective
kind of a
reporting.
person that
Right.
John was. You know, so for me, it was interesting because I saw both sides of the coin, although I did not know, and I've always said this. People say to me, "You were brave for doing that." I wasn't brave. I was ignorant. I was a 23-year-old theater rat living in New York.
It was a huge gig.
And someone said, "Do you want to play John Belushi in a movie?" And it was the first movie I'd ever auditioned for. You know, you don't say, "No, I'm going to go tell you what the specials are for this evening."
Right.
You know, you take that gig. And 2 months into the gig, I found out what was going on, and
Right.
I had never heard the name Michael Ovitz.
Right.
You know, people were looking at me like, you don't know, you know, and I was like, "No, I don't know. Tell me." And it was terrifying. It was a very scary time in my life. you
Why?
know.
Because Ovitz was taking it personally and.
Well, you know, there
was
were
the
all these
blackball
things
thing,
being
yeah.
said that, you know, anybody who worked on that picture would never work again in Hollywood. And here I'm like, oh, it's everything I had aspired to my whole life, and it's my first movie. And I'm like, you kidding me? Nah.
But that's a weird way to start off.
It was a
really is.
very strange way to start off. And the fact of the matter is, I read for Wired, and I was, you know, sort of a comer at the time. I was reading for major movies, for major people. I did that movie for 5 months. I came back, and I was not seen for an under 5 in anything.
Really?
Wow.
Nothing. And it was Burt Reynolds who found out about through the focus puller, Tommy Maglos, the focus puller on Wired, went to this movie that I ended up doing with Burt, and told him about it. I told him what was going on. Unbeknownst to me, I didn't know. And then Tommy calls me and invites me down to Florida because he knew I was depressed and freaked out and didn't know what I was going to do. I walk into this corporate building, and you know, when you're on a film set, there's like tons of people, you know, all over the place. And I walk out of the elevators, and there's like 50 people, and then there's Burt Reynolds about 40 yards away, a throw away. And he stops, and he sees me, and he focuses in on me. He starts walking at me. You know, and I was a little bit of a uppity Greek kid. You know, I had a temper, and I thought, this son of a bitch is going to kick me off his set. You know, because at the time people were meeting me and going, "Oh, you're that fucking guy," and I was like, "Yeah, I'm that fucking guy." What? You know? And he's walking at me, and I'm like, "I'm gonna drop this prick," and I'm literally turn myself, and I clench my fist, and he's walking up to me, and I'm tensing, and here he comes, and he gets from me to you away, and I'm like literally there. I'm crouched, and he goes, "Burt Reynolds, pleasure to meet you," and I went from this to.
I love your work.
You're a great dater. He's just like, how you doing? And I shook his hand, and he goes, "Listen, I grew up during the McCarthy era, and I had a bunch of people,
Oh, wow.
a bunch of friends that were blacklisted, and I don't believe in it. I think you're a talented guy, and I want you to play the villain in this movie.
Wow,
that I'm doing."
great.
And I went from like I'm going to drop this prick to I'm hired.
That's
with
awesome.
like that, and I'll always remember him for that.